very good evening and a warm welcome to the program. We are coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, and tonight we'll be speaking about the negative socio-cultural practices that perpetuate violence against women and girls. I'll quickly introduce my panel for this evening, and I'll start right next to me. We have Reverend Richard Rukundo from the Church of Uganda. Welcome, Reverend.
Thank you.
And right next to him is Anne Gamurora, who is the Executive Director of CDFU.
Thank you.
All right, and in the audience, we have Dr. Uzobia Baine from Makerere University, the Directorate of Gender Mainstreaming. Thank you for joining us on the program. All right, let's say it as it is. Once again tonight, just a reminder for our conversation, we're speaking about the negative socio-cultural practices that perpetuate violence against women and girls. And to begin the conversation, I think it's important that we understand what we mean by that. What are these? What do we mean by negative socio-cultural practices that perpetuate violence against women and girls?
Yeah, I think what we all know, that the word negative has to do with things that we don't love, we don't like to have. And so we want to believe that social cultural contexts are always having the good and the positive and the negative. So when we talk about negative, it means there are things that actually are wrong in our social cultural contexts that we need to do away with. And I want to start thinking that those are things that maybe cause violence. We want to agree that they actually bring violence against women and girls. And so we want to say, what are we able to do away with those negative things?
When we speak about those negative things, give me examples of these cultural practices that we're talking about.
For example, I know that in the African context, or maybe the culture where we belong, most of us, it's men have the dominance. And that's something that's coming out because from a culture, maybe women were not very educated, girls were not supposed to go to school, and things like that. Now, girls are getting educated, and women can work and earn some money. So saying where we're coming from, were men supposed to actually see women at the same level as they are, or were they supposed to see them as maybe lower than who they are? That's, for example, a very clear example that we have in our communities. It's very evident. I know that, for example, thinking that you can beat a girl or women, it's easy. It's okay to beat the other gender. Is much easier. They shouldn't say anything about it. So is that something that we have always believed happens that way? If a woman was beating a man, it would be seen as, oh, that's. But when a man beats a woman, it seems like, oh, that's okay, that's normal, usual. So
we've normalized
it's normalized. And so I'm thinking there are things that actually we've had, known, and believed and seen happen, and they tend to be okay, but actually we want to say they're not practices that we should accept in that context.
And do you want to share some other examples?
Yeah, I believe that each society usually likes to do something good for its own society, for its own people. But it is time to realize that those things, those practices, they think are good for the society, have consequences, which most of the consequences are about on women. For example, dowry. For example, female genital mutilation, where it is practiced in areas of Tepeth and Pokot, it is still there. Society thinks they are doing good. It is when a girl has her menstrual periods, they becomes a woman, and the rite of passage is that they cut the clitoris so that she becomes marriageable. After that, she's free to marry. This brings out early child marriages. This brings about female genital mutilation, which has very, very big consequences on that woman. First of all, medically, she may have fistula, she may have scars, she may have difficulty in childbirth, she may have difficulty in passing urine, and importantly, she will never enjoy sex.
I think my question every time we're having this conversation on female genital mutilation is, do they not know the difficulties that then young girls will go through after this happens? Are we really, really ignorant to the pain that we are causing? What exactly is in the minds of the people who accept for this to keep happening?
I think for them, society was doing good. They tell us from literature that for example, female genital mutilation was done to keep the girls safe, to keep them virgins. These men used to go for cattle grazing 6 months, and they would want to find their women untouched. So by making sure that they don't enjoy sex, it would deter them from extramarital relationships. So in that way, well, it is selfish, but they were doing good to themselves, to society.
That's very painful to hear. Dr. Isobia.
Thank you. I think there is a difference between knowing what is right and doing what is right. That just happens to be a reality in our social being. We are social beings. Because, first of all, you would wonder if something is bad. Because the data is there, medically, it has been proven. The question is that baffles everyone in the society is why does it continue? Human beings don't live in isolation, and I think that sense of connectedness, the social norms, sociologists will tell you there is a way how society makes sure that you conform to what has been normalized. And that is what actually keeps perpetuating the problem. The Reverend has just talked about, for example, the wife beating. Why would it be normal for a man to beat his wife, but it is not for a wife to beat the husband, where it happens? But the bottom line is that we should understand that what is bad for everybody. If somebody is beaten, they feel pain. It's just as simple as that. And it dehumanizes, it drives the humanity out of the person. So whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, that practice should be stopped. And I want to believe that where we were maybe 50 years ago is not where we are. But the problem is that the change is not happening as fast as we would want. Because if you are a victim of violence, you want to stop now, not tomorrow. I think that's the challenge we are dealing with. But otherwise, knowing what is right and doing what is right, they don't always go together, and yet they should.
Well, when you were speaking earlier, Reverend, and you started with them, the men as well, you spoke about them. And every time we have a conversation on female genital mutilation, there always comes out this conversation on, but even as we don't want to be circumcised, but then there are all these campaigns that are allowing for it to happen. And so while we know that one is medically approved, and you know, female genital mutilation is mutilation, there's still that conversation on men feel like they are being forced to participate in a practice that they don't, some men want to participate in.
Yeah, I think that we need to hear what has come about and is for good. And that's why, again, we go to the positive and the negative of what community has accepted as norms. And I think we right now have information about, say, circumcision, male circumcision, and the advantages of male circumcision. And we want to hear also about the female genital mutilation and hear about the disadvantages of that. So I think before we all say no, and there's always this kind of resentment to things sometimes without information. And I think that's why we need to help our communities appreciate that information is very helpful, and knowing what is right against what is wrong and what's been proven is very helpful. So I think there are many of us who come out and say this is not right, or maybe but they don't have real basis on what it is that they are choosing. And I come from the faith community as well, where we tend to say no to many things. And I always say, have we checked to know whether we know really that why we're saying no? Because if we, for example, I know that the faith communities are dominated by men in many things, and we tend to want to say maybe men are right in many things, but sometimes I'm like, have we really checked to know whether it's right?
Because a lot of people listen to you.
Yes, they do, but we know that we also, majority of us are men. And so the tendency to feel that maybe the male dominance is also true. We will not tend to listen to women. And so there is influence of that. And we're coming back from a cultural context where they've empowered us as men. We're now the leaders and people are listening to us. And so we need information as well. And I keep saying information is helpful. If you're going to be a leader, or if you're going to be influencing community, you also need to know the right information, pass out to the right people. So if you say no circumcision, give reasons why you're actually saying no. But if you're saying yes, there must be some reasons. And right now we have clear reasons why this is right against this one, which is wrong.
Dr. Isobia, you had very strong comments on this particular.
The question is, when you say male circumcision, let's agree that some men do not like it. Do we have movements of men that are campaigning against it? Because the question is, when we have, for example, women's movements that are really trying hard to fight female genital mutilation. Do we have male movements that are mobilizing to fight not only the problems around that male circumcision, for example, because there's also an element of force, even where it is beneficial. For example, from a cultural perspective, those communities which practice male circumcision, there's an element of force, where if somebody wants to do it, for example, medically, they feel that it's not the right one because it has not done culturally. So the question is, do we have male organizations that are really trying to fight, for example, forceful male circumcision, or for that matter, to fight the negative cultural practices?
As I was reading up earlier on some social norms, and this wasn't really to Uganda, but I thought I'd share them with you, that the word out there for young women as they're growing up is that a respectable woman marries early, a respectable woman is submissive to male authority, a woman is worth more as a wife than as a daughter. I don't know if you've heard these.
We've heard it, and it is a notion that is perpetuated through many societies, and it is to do with the power relations, that the man has the power, and it's perpetuated by both the cultural elders and also the faith movements. If you go to church, they say the husband is the head of the family, and you are supposed to submit.
Men are very backlayed in terms of advocating for what actually is not right in the communities. But I want to believe that where women have also come in front. For example, this gender activism and discussions, I always say to the ladies that it's good if they get men involved in this discussion, because it's no longer a women thing or a girl thing, and we need to be involved. And I'm glad I'm here because I'm one of those converted. My background is very bad, Josephine, because I grew up in a family of 7, and I was the eldest boy with 6 sisters following me. So I've had a lot of advocacy from childhood. Maybe that has made me who I am now in terms of defending the girls and the ladies and believing, because I always believed they were. But I believe men are positive. We tend to support football more. We tend to support lots of other things. We're not here advocacy about circumcision, maybe even when they feel it's forceful. Sometimes I don't feel they are coming out to say we should not do it forcefully. But I think the truth is that we should all accept what is right for our communities. And that's why we're saying the women and the girls are very important in our communities. And how do we, as faith leaders, we can't anymore use scripture to demean the gender of a lady or women and say this is what it says. When the Bible talks about the man being the head of the household, it actually gives responsibility as well. And as we know, men get out there and look for a wife. Then you bring the wife home, and so you have a responsibility to actually fend for the home. But we know many men are not doing that now. And so should the church come out and say, men, take up your position. You're in charge of this home. Sometimes we drop the children for the women and we don't care. We are on the pork joints taking pork and taking. So if you see men of the joints where men are, you see that they're absent at home. So I think for us saying the Bible back to men being the head of the household has a responsibility in terms of responsibility. You're not marrying someone's daughter to take them home, to just look at them or give them nothing. You have a responsibility to do in terms of taking care.
For us, we are running a campaign called Make Happiness Not Violence, and it is supported by the Embassy of Sweden through UN Women, and also by Spotlight. And what we want to do is to raise awareness and knowledge among especially the men, so that they form these movements. If we did form a movement of elders, cultural leaders in religious communities or religious leaders, you know, they would change the social norm and would have a new normal. It would be normal for a girl not to be mutilated, to be normal for a woman not to be beaten.
Okay, since you're talking about normalization, let's take a short break. When we return, we'll start from there. thank you for staying with us. Tonight we are speaking about the negative social-cultural practices that perpetuate violence against women and girls. And before we took a break, Annie was speaking about normalizing violence and looking at the stigma that surrounds it, that stigma often shifts to the abused as opposed to the abuser. And I'd like us to talk about that normalization for a bit. What do we mean when we say normalization?
I went to a supermarket recently and I found, last week actually, and there were many women and men, young men and women. And so this man talks to a lady and says, I'll beat you. I'm waiting for you and you're delaying me and I'll beat you. And he's very rough and he's talking to the lady. And everybody's looking at him and he's quiet and everybody's quiet. And actually he's serious. And then the lady comes up and says, do what you want. And I'm getting so irritated. I'm thinking, wait, he wants to beat you and you're thinking do what you want? And no one is talking about it. So I turned to the man and say, I think you are ashamed that you actually can want to beat a woman in the presence of all of us, and you're proud about it.
Even in secret.
Where you come from. And it's daylight, and it's open mic, and we're often like 20 people all around there. No one is saying anything about it. This is wrong. That's what I call normalization.
These 16 days of activism have been taking place since 1991, right? This is what, how many years?
18.
Okay, 18 years. And I know that even before the 18 years, we've had a lot of campaigns against these practices and, you know, violence against women and girls. Why do they continue? How is it okay for that conversation to have happened?
What I think is behavior change is slow. It takes time to change, but I'm sure there is more consciousness about violence against women as being bad, and action is following, but at a slow rate. So that's why we need a lot more effort and different way of doing things for some change that we can see to happen.
So we know the practice is bad, we're just indifferent?
The practice is bad, but if you say it is normal, it means there is an advantage to it. I talked about the power relations. If you remove the wife beating, what are you leaving the man with as a means of showing power? That has been a big problem.
Okay.
And look at this woman who experiences violence in the home and goes to a police station. The police will say, oh, you were beaten by your husband. Ah, those are matters of the home. You go back to your husband. Even your mother will tell you so. Even your mother-in-law will tell you so.
I think it also depends on what do we understand by this power. Power has got many ramifications, because there are also situations where men are powerless, but they are made to believe that actually they are powerful. For example, we have seen, especially in the villages, where polygamous men actually can starve, but that is not part of the narrative that you hear being talked about in the villages, because the perception that it's this powerful man who has many wives, we never understand what does it mean for him to be a polygamous man. What does it mean for these women? Because there are elements where even those social cultural practices affect the men negatively. And sometimes for us to solve these problems, we need to look at either side. What is negative about this practice and what is positive about it on either side? Because, for example, in situations of gender-based violence, everybody suffers at the end of that day. You have seen men who have murdered their wives, women who have murdered their husbands in retaliation. Nobody ever benefits from that. So the question is, as a society, what do we do about it?
Okay.
Because nobody is benefiting from this. We keep perpetuating it, but there's nobody who's winning.
All right. Okay, so let's take some questions from the audience. Do you have a question?
All right. My name is Nicholas Kamoske, a student coordinator at Makerere University. To take you back a little bit, the director mentioned about knowing what is right and doing what is right. I think in the first place, the women have conceptualized what is right and how to do it. by claiming space. And men have known what is right and have chosen to focus on what women are doing and being against it. I have had many of my fellow age mates seeing us involved in issues of feminism and fighting against violence against girls, especially in tertiary institutions. And they are saying that is for women. Why are you involved in things of women? But I want to also ask, not only to the panelists, but to even the viewers, what are we in our age hoping to see in the future? And what are we going to do about it?
Are you a feminist?
Sure.
What inspired you to become one?
I love to see a violence-free society wherever I go.
Okay. Who wants to take his question?
I think he says something very important for me, that the space, the women claiming the space and the men, and then the whole scenario of who's right and what's right, and who has the right to say this is right and this is wrong. And I am happy that you actually are a champion to young people, in young people's community. I'm myself not a feminist, but I believe in advocating for what is right. And I think men need to see you as a man standing for what is right. I want to agree with you that as a young man, for me, I call you a champion. I have been in institutions, I never used to accept people who would demean young people or girls, and I would stand for that. That has not made me any less of a man, and I believe I am a true man, but I always say it's right for us to have men who are exemplary. And being an example is a good thing. So for me, I am encouraging you, and maybe what you should do is get more boys and more men around you to believe that what you're doing is right, instead of believing that it is
it's for women.
It's for women, and you're just invading their space.
Okay. Let's take another question. You had a question? You want to respond to him?
There is a deliberate effort for the institutions of learning, and actually some of these students come from the program we are running. But the problem is that it is too little compared to the amount of work that is needed to be done. Because at every stage, whether at the traditional institutions, whether in the education institutions, across all education institutions, these efforts must be there, because this problem cuts across the whole strata of society. Whether it is the rich, whether it's the poor, whether it's the middle, the problem persists. So for you to tackle it, it means you must have a multi-pronged approach. And you must, it's like the chicken and egg, what comes first? You cannot say that you will look at it as somebody else's responsibility. You first have to take a personal initiative. And then that's how you can influence others.
I think then my question is, why don't people make this personal? Why I asked if you were a feminist is because usually when you find a man who is, or one who is not, but wants equality for all, it is because either they've seen their sister being beaten up, or their mother, was treated shabbily, or that they've seen somebody who is close to them suffering the effects of violence or sexual harassment or something, and that has made them want to participate in the conversation. So is everybody waiting for that?
The problem is, how do we conceptualize feminism? If feminism means that that person who is ready to fight, for example, gender-based violence, or violence against women and girls, and you're there by conviction, it is not a problem. But then he cannot straight away define himself as such, because he does not understand how we perceive the feminist to be. So his difficulty in defining himself as such is not necessarily a problem with him as a person, but how we have come to conceptualize the problem of gender-based violence, the feminism, all these terminologies. Depends on how we understand them. But if you understand feminism as a movement of trying to make sure that our society is free of that violence, then it's not a problem.
As communities, we have challenge with activism versus getting people to accept. The activism seems to be more radical, tends to take it or leave it, and I don't believe our society has changed that. That's why I say, I heard you very clearly that you said men accept that things are wrong, they need to change them. but they're not taking it because they're very careful not to go to the activism mode. They're thinking, activism, that's yours. I don't want to be part of it. So we want to see what is other than activism, other than declaring ourselves.
So are we going to find new terms?
What are we going to actually do better?
For them to fit in.
If violence is supposed to stop, it is supposed to stop now. And now that's where the problem of activism comes in. Activism sometimes is taken as a negative thing.
That's true.
And that's why, especially they are cagey. But if activism is supposed to mean that we are proactive about solving societal problems, I want to believe, Reverend, that when you stand at that pulpit and you are preaching against gender-based violence, to me, that is proper activism.
I use advocate actually.
Advocate.
I say I'm a gender-based advocate.
Okay.
I advocate against.
But what
I
I
don't know whether
think,
I want to be activist, but I'm advocate.
but what I think is we really do need leaders
Yes.
for a society to change the norms. First of all, they must realize that it's not good for them. For someone to change, they say, what is in it for me? Why should I? And if we had a leader to catalyze that consciousness among community and among the elders, church elders and other elders who usually change things, then you are more likely to have a beginning of a social change.
Okay. Well, let's take one more question and then we'll take a break.
Mine goes to the Reverend. We all know that sometimes there is no clear-cut difference between religion and culture. That for a long time, in order for religion to be acceptable, the church has tried to create that intermarriage kind of thing with religion. We have been Christians, I think, all our lives since we were born. And you will go to some churches and you would think that women go to churches to seek refuge and to seek, peace. They would tell this woman who has been battered that, you cannot get out of this marriage because, divorce is forbidden. Just go back to your husband, ask him for forgiveness. And there's so many churches preaching this kind of gospel. Actually, if you ask me, that the person who normalizes violence against women the institution that normalizes violence because these are preachings that go on every day,
True.
So what do you have to say about what has the church done?
I think you ran away from the question, but it has phoned you.
It has come back.
I think, thank you very much. And I want to agree that you're very right. Church and culture have tended to be together. And as a church leader now, I know there are many things we're trying to talk about in a different way. For example, I'm very much now advocating for the clergy, for the clerical people to actually know the law. Because I think we're very ignorant of the law. That's why quickly we'll say, we'll pray for you, we'll counsel you, we'll get you back to that violent marriage. Yet we very know that sometimes we even will do a burial for someone who has died in a marriage we knew that was violent. So for me, I'm saying before you clergy officiate on a burial and say God has chosen to take you, when you actually knew that there was violence happening, you need to actually know what the law is. If this person cannot change, you have to say the law will take its course. Because honestly, we're all under the law of the land. And that one should not deceive us, whether we're political leaders, religious leaders, we actually subscribe to the law of the land. And sometimes we have to say the law will take its course, honestly. I have said sometimes if you can't change, the law will take its course. But I want to agree also with you that, as you know, we're Christian communities, and especially churches are full of men, or women, and children, maybe because they come for hope. And that's a hope we give them, that things will be better. And I also want to believe that in this country, or maybe in our communities, we need to create a sense of hope. And maybe hope is not in the law, it's not in activism, it's in the things that they see can work out better. There's always a possibility for change, and I want to believe there's change. So what I want to believe is that Christianity gives hope where there is no hope. And many places there's no hope. I'm saying, are you running from the hot plate to the fire? Because sometimes you're running away from this troublesome home, when actually where you're going is not any different. So we want to create where there's hope. But I also want to believe that we also subscribe to the law, and that's why we're encouraging our clergy, our leadership of the church, to actually get to know what does the law say. And what will happen if you cannot change, then the law will take. Actually, as a Christian, as a clergy leader, I've had to take people to the police I've had to take men who are being troublesome to the police because I now know the law.
I think there is also one thing that we need to address, the question of hypocrisy. Yeah. Because, I mean, even the Bible, I'm a Christian, by the way, and I think majority of us are. You see, we interpret it selectively to suit our needs in quotes. For example, this question of submission. Every time I'm at a wedding, I'm listening to those Ephesians, I can't quote them, where we are being asked to submit. And I keep on wondering, if men did what Jesus commanded them to do, then there's no woman that would mind submitting. But the problem is that when we are battling the wives, we are telling them the religion requires them to submit, culture requires them to submit. But we never tell the men that they are supposed to love the wives.
Exactly.
And that is a command from
Yes,
Jesus.
I agree.
So for me, actually, the biggest problem is the hypocrisy with which we interpret these scriptures. Because the Bible is very dynamic, by the way. Everybody finds solace in the Bible. But the bottom line is that what is the connection between what we believe and what we do? That is where the disconnection happens.
I think this is a good place for us to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, and we're still talking about the negative social cultural practices that perpetuate violence against women and girls. We'll just take one more question from the audience, and then we can wrap up the show. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. My question would be phrased maybe in different words. Can we look at all the issues of the violences that we are having in maybe words like positive equality for positive change? For example, if maybe the submissions in families, why can't we look at maybe respect and maybe fulfilling your responsibilities? Then if it is maybe the forced circumcision and the mutilation, why can't we look at the levels, who benefits, who's losing, how maybe their effects? Then there we shall have an equality and a positive change than maybe the feminists who come up and instead of advocating for certain things, they are looking at maybe the chauvinism of dominating the other gender. Thank you.
I hope I got you right. I had a question here that I wanted to ask as well, which was, what do we mean when we say replace harmful social norms with positive ones? Does that sort of speak to your question? Okay.
We are running a campaign, Make Happiness, Not Violence, and we aim to raise awareness and knowledge about the harmful practices, what's good in them and what is harmful in them. Of course, they were good. Like I said, the female genital mutilation was good to keep women chaste. But what are the disadvantages? If the disadvantages outweigh the advantages, then that society is more likely to change. For example, they may decide that now, if the elders said, from now on, when girls mature, the rite of passage will be to jump a river or a line, and then you are women without cutting. I think that would work on both sides.
So that's replacing
That
with
is
a
replacing
positive one.
Yeah.
I think we all want to agree that societies are dynamic, communities are dynamic. We can't stay where we were. And I don't believe in the Christian community where I belong. And as a leader, we've had a lot of dynamic things. Previously, when Faith came here, you're not allowed to clap, you're not allowed to drum, maybe play guitars in the church. Now there are many things
Women
happening
were not
different.
allowed in.
Women weren't allowed to be leaders or clergy. Now we have clergy women and leadership. And I think there's a lot of dynamics. So I want to look at the positive in terms of the way we've going. If you have educated women, if you have mothers earning some money, if you have then we need to look at how do we get it. For example, I am one of those who've been advocating, and I'm glad we have some students here, about, for example, girl being in class and doing her papers and passing, because I don't believe they should get free marks, so they should not bribe to get free exams. But also they should not be seen as you cannot perform very well, so you must get a sexual favor so that you can get your marks free. I don't believe if you come to class and you're able to actually do your papers, you can actually win everybody and become the best. And so I begin believing that if you give an opportunity, but you also have a lot of the negativity still accepting of saying, I'm a gender, I'm a lady, maybe I deserve to have this, I deserve to be treated less. That keeps the negativity still perceived. So I look at the positive. Even as you talk about who benefits more, do we actually see the people who are benefiting, the girls and the women, who are supposed to say, this campaign is yours and supposed to liberate you? Do they appreciate it? And I wanted to hear something come from you about what do these girls and the women that we're trying to say, please come out and stand for what is right, and are they themselves seeing it that it is for their benefit? Or sometimes they actually don't see it as, they're thinking this is a campaign by activists who have their own benefit and it's not for us.
I think it's a mixed package, I could say. There are those who see it as a positive and they have taken it on. But there are also those who are yet to appreciate that actually it benefits everybody. And that's why you still have those negative connotations around issues like activism, feminism, and that kind of thing. And I want to agree with what she was suggesting. The narratives have to change, but how do they change? They will change because people have come to appreciate the positive aspects around it. Earlier on, you said that the way we started with gender, now people are adding other things. But the bottom line is, what is in it for us as a society? If we change, the statistics are always there. They calculate what is the cost, for example, in terms of national the GDP. What's the cost of violence? And if we don't see something positive from the change we want, then we continue like that, and development will continue to elude us. I think, to me, that is the most important thing. What is in it for us as a society? Should we continue with these levels of violence against women and girls? That is the question.
So I just have one more question before we then all wrap up. Do we see this trickling down into politics? Are the people who are the decision makers, change makers, do we see them participating, or are they afraid that participating in campaigns against violence against women and girls will cost them an election? Are they participating?
Oh yeah, there are many examples where they say, the leaders can't talk about female genital mutilation in Amudat. They will lose the election. And even talking about marriage, child marriage, because society wants the girls to get married and stay and have good homes. But society also fears having girls become pregnant early. So a mother who loves the daughter will agree for a child to get married early so that she doesn't have an illegitimate child in the home. And many leaders also feel the temperature of the community and will say what the community, what he thinks the community will say yes to. If you are against something that the community treasures and loves so much, they will not give you votes.
It's very unfortunate when you have leaders who can't stand for the truth. I think I'm glad for my Archbishop, for example, he's been saying statement against violence, against how we need to support women. And for example, one of the things he has said recently is how we support the sexual bill, the sexual offences bill, to really be something that would defend. And for me, I'm happy because that bill has lots of things to do with young people. We are tired of these stories of where men get women, girls in schools are being used by their own teachers, and that's something that we as a society we need to get out of. And so when I hear men who are supposed to be our leaders not stand for what is true, and I know that even us in the faith communities, I've had a faith leader come to me before talking about how we should not be violent to children, and he said, you want us to stop beating our children when actually we still beat our women? And this is a faith leader. And I'm thinking there are even those who haven't changed within our faith leaders. It's not just political leaders, but it's very unfortunate that you would have political leaders, church leaders, or even cultural leaders who actually see the truth but divert from the truth and decide to side with the majority in terms of, and for me, Jesus was a good example. He didn't stand for the majority, he stood for what is right. And if it's something we need to learn from, we need to stand for what is truth. And for me, I'm happy for these leaders who stand out and become champions and become examples. We need role models. We don't need mass winning politics. We need role models, and this society is lacking many of those models.
Reverend Rukundo, I'd like you to start our closing process. What would you like us to take home from this conversation?
I think for me, the end is that change must happen now. And I'm glad for whoever is involved in supporting us to say our women and our girls must not suffer violence with any excuse. We cannot give any excuse from the faith foundation, from the political, from any cultural context and say there's reason to have violence.
What is your call to action as a man of the cloth?
And I'm calling upon, first, my community where I come from, the faith leaders. I think we need to stand out. So I want to hear men of our bishops, men of our clergy, men of our faith leaders stand and say, it is not right to do that. And so I would want to see many of champions come out. And I'm calling for many champions, many advocates, many role models who I will say, this is not right. So I want to stand out there and continue to make women role models where we can be able to say, it is not right to see this violence. And even us in our homes. And I know there are many of us sometimes who even talk about one thing and do the other thing in our homes. We may ourselves be surprised that we have faith leaders who batter their women at home and do lots of this. Are we role models in our own houses? Okay. And I want to say, each of us should be a role model in their own house, in their own space. And I want to believe that with change at individual level, we can bring change to the whole country, the whole community.
Anne?
I would like to thank my government who saw this violence against women and girls as a problem and allowed us to have the 16 days of activism to raise awareness and knowledge about violence against women and girls as a problem. And I would like to thank also our funders, the Embassy of Sweden and through UN Women who have made this possible. They also be thanked. And I'd like to thank everybody who is implementing the Make Happiness Not Violence campaign with Communication for Development Foundation. I will say, please keep on. And don't stop at the 16 days of activism, but continue the whole year through.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Izobia.
If you look at all our social institutions, be it educational, be it traditional, state institutions, they are all dominated by men. So if they take a primary responsibility to drive this change that we all desire, I think we shall move a little bit faster because violence, even one case is already one too many.
Well, thank you so much for all of your contributions and to our studio audience for participating in this particular episode of the show. And as we close, I'd like to let you know that this particular episode was done in collaboration with CDFU, UN Women, and the Swedish Embassy. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.